Tennessee football added a 4-star wide receiver in Braylon Staley. The receiver comes from Aiken High School, which is in Aiken, South Carolina, which is the county seat of Aiken County. He chose the Vols over North Carolina and Miami. And Clemson was one of his favorites, but the receiver room got so loaded, he decided to look elsewhere. Staley was the 4th commitment for the month of June for the Vols. That gives their recruiting class, I'm looking it up now, but if I'm not mistaken, they have 15 recruits now for their 2024 recruiting class. Yes, they have 15 recruits, and they picked up 4 in the month of June alone. The most key of those 4 was Boo Carter, the one that everybody had been talking about for a while, the athlete, 6 feet 180. He's listed as a 4-star receiver on Rivals, but he's actually a 4-star athlete everywhere else, and he'll actually probably play defensive back. Meanwhile, Jordan Burns, coming out of Atlanta, was their other commitment. They also picked up Max Anderson out of Texas. I think that was their biggest commitment, Max Anderson. I thought that was a huge one for them, the offensive lineman out of Texas. And then Braylon Staley to close it out. Now, they did have a loss on the trail, and that was J.J. Harrell, who decommitted from them in early June. So we kind of wrote about this back, I want to say back in early June. We had a story that June was going to somewhat be Josh Heupel's make or break month. He needed to recruit well in June because here's the thing about Tennessee. Here's what we were talking about for a while. Tennessee has the NCAA investigation, has the issues ongoing that are plaguing them, and 2024 is going to be the first class that they can build for the future. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk about Staley first, though. Staley, it was kind of odd that he committed. Caleb Jaru and I talked about this last week because, Mike Matthews is still on Tennessee's radar and people like that. Staley looks more like a slot receiver, given his size at 6 feet. He is, as Gabe Brooks wrote on 247 Sports and Jaru quoted, lean athletic build with a nice size catch radius that combines with consistent hands catching acumen to expand the catch window. Big play athleticism shows in the vertical passing game and as a contested catch weapon. It's exactly what you want in Josh Heupel's system. That's literally what you want, is a guy that can make the big play and that can dominate and can win on vertical routes. And so from that perspective, Braylon Staley is a huge pickup for Tennessee football. I mean, a gigantic one. Another point about him is, quote, he excels as a high-pointing target and in-back shoulder opportunities thanks to athleticism, timing, and body control adjustment ability. He finds the boundary and regularly gets a foot in when it's not easy to do so. Accelerates quickly and plays with above-average top-end speed, especially when allowed a runaway. Strong multi-sport profile, includes multiple South Carolina 4-way track and field championships, can more consistently create late separation, more explosive in linear situations than lateral, and show some redirecting gear down. This is literally what you want in Josh Heupel's system. This is what Jalen Hyatt was. He may not be the quickest when it comes to 40 times or off the jump or things like that. However, he can accelerate and he can get separation late, and on these vertical routes, that's exactly the type of receiver you want in the system. So even though there were some other wideouts Josh Heupel is targeting, and they're going more for size and they're going more for winning one-on-one matchups and advantages like that, it is a big deal that they could land somebody like Braylon Staley. They need somebody like Staley to be able to handle everything that's going to be thrown at them, because it's key to have a strong go-to wideout and a dangerous slot guy in this system. You had, everybody talked about Jalen Hyatt last year, but the year before you had Velus Jones Jr. Without Jones, Cedric Tillman isn't a 1,000-yard receiver. That's a huge deal. Tillman and Jones needed to complement each other together. Hyatt was effective because even though after Tillman went down, Brew McCoy and Ramel Keaton were huge assets for Tennessee on the outside. So even though Jaru and I were both a little shocked about Staley's commitment, given what Tennessee is going after at wideout, it does kind of make sense, because if you're a slot receiver, you take a chance going to Tennessee, because if you can get into that starting role, you're going to get a lot of balls thrown your way, and you're going to get schemed open plenty of times just due to your speed alone. And you've got to give a lot of credit to Heupel and his staff for landing a guy like Braylon Staley. Now, does he feel the exact needs of Tennessee? No, because Tennessee is still pretty loaded at wide receiver, despite what was said about them last year on 3. They have pretty good depth in the receiver room. They could have gone this whole class without a wide receiver, quite honestly. Squirrel White still there. Dante Thornton still there, who can play on the inside and the outside. Ramel Keaton will be gone probably, and Brew McCoy probably will too after this year, but you still got Nathan Leacock. But at the same time, so as far as slot receivers go, this probably, Staley isn't a necessary pickup, but he does give them more options long-term in the slot. Largely because, again, we don't know what's going to happen with Squirrel White and Dante Thornton down the road. So this is a still pretty good pickup. And Heupel doesn't have to load up at receiver too much. Again, he runs 2 to 3 guys max in a regular year, which is a philosophy I've always believed in. I never understood the rotating in and out. That was a Butch Jones philosophy, hence the reason Marquez North never lived up to his freshman year hype. So I think it's a good thing to have one go-to guy at wideout, one go-to guy at slot, and then another reliable guy at wideout on the other end. And those are your 3 receivers, and that's how you go about it. And Braylon Staley, could fit into that pretty well. Also, let's look at who he was targeting. So he was looking at Clemson. Tennessee getting him over Clemson is not the best sign for Tennessee, not largely because of why he didn't pick Clemson. It was very clear he backed out of Clemson because he was worried about the depth of the receiver room. But he did pick Tennessee over North Carolina and Miami. And Miami has an NIL collective right on par with Tennessee. So if we're going to talk about NIL and the power of NIL, Miami is right there. So for Tennessee to beat out Miami, that stands out. That really does for them to beat out North Carolina. I know North Carolina isn't a blue blood in football, but with Mac Brown there and him being from the Carolinas, that does stand out. So Tennessee got a win on the recruiting trail with the addition of Braylon Staley, and he is going to help them a lot when it comes to depth, when it comes to things they need. So all in all, I can't really criticize this pickup, even though I was a little shocked. We found out early last week on ESPN that Tennessee was going to have Braylon Staley committed. That Tennessee was the favorite to land Braylon Staley. That was one of the predictions. And that's where the shot came through because, again, Mike Matthews, people like that still out on the trail. And those are the bigger deals. Those are the guys Tennessee really needs to get because McCoy and Keaton will probably be – after this year, Tennessee's going to have a brand new crop of wideouts they're going to have to look at. Because, remember, Dante Thornton is more of a slot guy. They can move him to wideout, but he's not proven there. Brew McCoy and Ramel Keaton will both probably be gone, so they can maybe move Thornton, and then they could hope – that Nathan Leacock emerges, but there's still Caleb Webb, Chaz Nimrod, but they got to find other guys just to be sure. And that's not really clear if they have that yet. So all in all, to be fair, this is a good pickup, but it doesn't solve the biggest needs for Tennessee football, even in the receiver room. And that's going to be the question for them long-term is how can they make sure that they got enough depth at wide receiver right now. That's not an issue, but how can they be sure that they have enough depth long term? That's something we're going to touch on going down the road.